Ever feel like you're constantly being asked for more, even when you're already stretched thin, like someone's getting more out of you than you're getting back?
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a concept that I think explores that feeling. We're going to call it mileage.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at this through the lens of Iceberg Slim's book, Pimp, The Story of My Life.
Yeah.
Now, before we jump in, it's really important to acknowledge that Slim's world was harsh.
Yeah,
It was exploitative.
for
He
sure.
was a pimp. And his book doesn't shy away from any of the realities of that life. But what's fascinating about this is that Slim's concept of mileage can be applied to so much more than just pimping. It's like a way to look at exploitation and power dynamics in all these different parts of life.
Right. And what I think is really striking about Slim's work is that he doesn't just describe this exploitation,
Right.
he breaks it down systematically. So in his world, mileage is literally the amount a woman can endure in prostitution before she breaks down, loses her appeal, to put it bluntly, becomes less profitable.
It's a chilling way to look at a person, isn't it?
It is.
Reducing them to a resource, like a machine, like wear and tear on a car or something.
Exactly. And Slim was meticulous in how he calculated this mileage. He considered a woman's emotional and physical resilience, figuring out how long she could function in that environment before reaching her breaking point. It's almost like, he was treating them like cars, measuring their usable lifespan.
Yeah. And this is where it gets really disturbing, I think, because Slim didn't just observe this mileage. He actively manipulated it.
Yeah, this concept of mileage takes on an even darker dimension when we consider how Slim manipulated it. He was a master of control, figuring out each woman's breaking point and then pushing them right to the edge.
So it wasn't just about physical force or intimidation.
No, it was far more insidious than that. He cultivated dependency. He would break these women down emotionally, isolate them, and then offer them like a twisted form of security and belonging.
So how did he actually do that? What were his tactics?
Slim was incredibly calculated in his approach. He would alternate between emotional abuse and what he called calculated kindness. He'd dangle hope in front of them, promising a better future, all while keeping them trapped in this cycle of exploitation.
It's almost like he was playing a game, pushing them and pulling them to get as much mileage as he could.
Totally. And it's a chilling illustration of how someone can exploit another person's vulnerabilities for their own gain. And what's even more disturbing is how aware Slim was of the psychological effects. He talked about women with low mileage still having emotions like guilt and shame. But as their mileage increased, they became emotionally numb, desensitized to the horrors they were experiencing.
That's a stark image of the dehumanizing effects of this kind of exploitation. It makes you wonder, though, is this concept of mileage really confined to Slim's world?
That's the question we're going to explore. Because unfortunately, I think there are echoes of mileage in many other aspects of our lives.
When you mentioned echoes of mileage in other parts of our lives, like, my mind immediately went to the workplace.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't felt that pressure to constantly produce? Like, your worth is only measured by your output.
It's a pervasive feeling, isn't it? And I think Slim's concept of mileage gives us this framework for understanding why that is.
Okay.
So think about how many companies prioritize short-term gains and profits over the well-being of their employees.
Right.
They measure output, they push for efficiency, and often, whether intentionally or not, they drive their workforce towards burnout.
It's like they're checking the mileage on their employees.
Yeah.
Seeing how much they can extract before they break down, just like Slim did with the women he exploited.
Yeah.
But it's not always as blatant as pushing people to work long hours, is it?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's often much more subtle than that. Think about all the ways companies try to keep employees engaged, to squeeze out just a little more mileage. Things like Employee of the Month programs, performance bonuses, the constant dangling of promotions.
Right. Those little pats on the head to keep you going, make you feel valued while they're still getting everything they can out of you. It's almost like they're using those things to mask the underlying exploitation.
Precisely. And just like Slim, some employers are masters at playing on our insecurities, our need for validation, to keep us pushing ourselves beyond our limits.
It's disturbing how these patterns repeat themselves, even in seemingly different worlds.
Totally. And this concept of mileage isn't just limited to the workplace. It can also manifest in our personal relationships.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so have you ever had a friendship or even a romantic relationship where you felt like you were constantly giving but receiving very little in return?
Yeah, I think most of us have experienced that at some point.
Right.
That feeling of being drained, like you're being taken advantage of emotionally.
That's exactly what mileage can look like in a personal relationship.
Right.
It's about someone exploiting your emotional capacity, your willingness to give, without offering genuine reciprocity.
So in those situations, how do we recognize the signs of mileage extraction? Like, what are some of the red flags we should be looking out for?
Well, one of the biggest red flags is an imbalance in the relationship. Are you constantly the one providing support, listening to their problems, offering advice, but they're rarely there for you when you need them?
Yeah, that's a really clear example. I think a lot of people can relate to that. You're always the shoulder to cry on, but they disappear when you need support.
Exactly. Another red flag is the use of manipulation tactics, much like the ones Slim employed. Think about things like the hot and cold treatment, guilt trips, or strategic moments of affection, all designed to keep you hooked, to keep that mileage flowing in their direction.
It's almost like they're giving you just enough to keep you invested, to prevent you from walking away.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us to some really uncomfortable ethical questions. If we're honest with ourselves, haven't we all at some point viewed a relationship in terms of what we can get out of it?
That's a tough question, but an important one to consider. I think we need to ask ourselves, are we valuing people for who they are, for their inherent worth? Or are we simply seeing them as a means to an end, as resources to be used?
That's the crux of it. And this leads to a broader societal question. Are we, as a society, okay with systems that prioritize short-term gain, even if it means exploiting people, burning them out, treating them as disposable?
It seems like Slim's world, while extreme, holds up a mirror to some of the darker aspects of human nature and the systems we create.
Yeah, it really does. It makes you think. It's a sobering thought that even though Slim's world was so different from our own, his concept of mileage still illuminates these, unsettling patterns that exist, in our workplaces, our relationships, and even our broader society as a whole.
Right, and what's important to remember here is that Slim's book isn't a guidebook.
Right. It's not like he's trying to teach people how to exploit others.
Yeah.
It's a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
a glimpse into a world where human beings are, dehumanized and commodified. His work, it serves as a powerful critique of any system that prioritizes short-term gain over long-term well-being.
Like he's holding up this dark mirror to society, forcing us to confront the potential for exploitation that exists within us all,
Yeah.
within the systems that we inhabit.
Exactly. And that's, I think, where Slim's concept becomes a tool for self-reflection. It challenges us to examine our own lives and ask ourselves some tough questions.
Yeah.
Are there areas where I'm giving more than I'm getting?
Right.
Am I allowing myself to be treated as a means to an end, rather than a valuable individual?
These are questions we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
In every aspect of our lives. And it's so easy to get caught up, in the daily grind and not realize how we might be contributing to or even experiencing this kind of mileage extraction ourselves.
Awareness is the first step,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once we recognize these patterns, we can start to challenge them, both in our own lives and the world around us.
So what are some concrete steps we can take? How can we move away from this, exploitative mindset?
Well, for starters, we can, choose to value people for who they are, not just for what they can do for us. We can advocate for systems that prioritize, well-being over relentless productivity, encourage sustainable practices that don't rely on exploitation.
Yeah, it's about shifting our mindset, isn't it? From this transactional view of relationships to one based on mutual respect, empathy, genuine connection.
There you go.
It's about recognizing our own worth
Yeah.
and the worth of others.
And it's about setting boundaries. It's about, having the courage to say no when we're being asked to give more than we can or should. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Iceberg Slim's world and his concept of mileage, I will leave you with this thought. You have the power to define your own mileage. You can choose to prioritize your own well-being, set healthy boundaries, and walk away from relationships or situations that drain you rather than nourish you.
By becoming aware of, mileage and how it operates, we can start to make choices that lead to more fulfilling, equitable, and sustainable relationships, both, personally and professionally.
That's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world.